Democrats had more money than God. They had a candidate who was supposed to unite the country and transcend racial lines. They were running against a nearly 80-year-old felon who's offended just about every living being on the planet, including a pope or two.
And we still lost. And we didn't just lose, we got our asses handed to us because more and more of our base of young voters, black voters, Hispanic voters crossed the aisle to vote for an objectively flawed candidate instead of the Democrats.
So what the hell happened? Some Democrats blame Biden, saying he should have stepped aside. Others blame Harris. And then there are the ones who say there was nothing we could have done.
Well, I'm here to call bullshit. I'm Adam.
And this is Ian.
And we've been on the ground for this election and others. And we've seen what the Democratic Party refuses to say out loud. And that's why we started this podcast.
This is Jackass Politics, where we tell the hard truths about why our party keeps losing, how we can do better, and what it's going to take to win, not just this election, but the future.
And hey, as I said, I'm Adam. I've been in the trenches of politics for years now. I serve as a Wake Forest, North Carolina town commissioner. And I've also ran for North Carolina State House. And I'm just tired of seeing working people get sold out by the phonies on both sides.
And I'm Ian. I'm here because I've had enough of the bullshit too. Whether it's corporate greed, fake populism, or weak-ass excuses, we're here to call it like we see it. No filters.
We're calling out Republicans' bullshit first and foremost. Racist dog whistles, corporate servitude, wannabe tough guy authoritarian, while demanding Democrats find some spine.
We're not just going to bitch about Republicans. We're here to push Dems to remember they're supposed to be the party of the working class, not the country club.
But all right, before we get into the bullshit, let's set a critical issue, Ian. I really got to know where you stand on butter in the fridge or in the counter. Do you like a normal human being?
I mean, fridge, obviously, right? You know what? Who just leaves their butter out on the counter to collect bacteria and be disgusting?
They make a thing called a butter dish, Ian.
But it's still like it's gonna just turn into a soupy mess, and it has to, I mean, it's dairy product, man.
It's a fat. It doesn't turn soupy. You leave it out, and then when you go to, it's not like raw dog in the air or anything here. It's just you put it in a butter dish when you're ready for it, and you need to make toast. You're not mashing your toast into a million different pieces.
Your toast gets hot, man. It melts the butter for you.
Man, I don't know how you're doing things in your household, but that's just not how we do them here.
Yeah, well, that's disgusting.
So obviously here at Jackass Politics, we want to make sure that we do have proper debates. So what Ian and I were just doing was just kidding around, obviously. I actually put my butter in the fridge like a normal person. I don't... Anybody that does it's a little weird. But, we want to have factful debates here as well. So we also want to set up being the most truthful debates. So anytime that we have a debate that happens in our show period, we want to set up ground rules. Some of the ground rules will, in fact, be here that if there's a person in the debate that feels like they need to study up more, or maybe they've gotten to a point they can't argue anymore, they've gotten past their field of depth, but they still feel that they're confident in their decision, you have the ability to call a timeout. And so, all right, anytime that's thrown up, debate ends, and we will adjourn at a different time after the other person feels comfortable in bringing it back up. Also, we do want to believe in being factual, as I said. So if we feel that we need to take a quick pause and do a quick fact check, the other person can call the other out, and we do have our computer here. So we're going to try to make that not be clunky and boring for you, but we also want to make sure that we're holding ourselves. We don't know everything. We're a bunch of jackasses here, right?
We're dudes. So. That's it.
So, moving right along, won't we go into, who you and I are, Ian? You want to kick us off?
Sure. So for me, and I think Adam and I kind of have this in common a little bit, I grew up in a very conservative household. My parents and my sister were both, very conservative. business owners, they kind of had that mentality: low taxes, no less welfare, less government interference, states' rights, all that stuff. And I kind of grew up with some of those mentalities basically until I went to college. My undergrad was at East Carolina University, and I sort of got the typical college experience where you end up getting exposed to a lot of other ideas and a lot of other beliefs, and my opinions and my political beliefs tended to shift at that point. I still held some, I would say, more moderate fiscal stances, but I tended to still be very, very socially liberal. And it wasn't until I kind of saw what the Democratic Party was doing with Obama and how it was becoming more, I don't know. Honestly, the word is cool, right? It was fucking cool. And that was when I sort of, okay, this is interesting. Let me get on board with this a little bit more. And then, sure as shit, here comes Donald Trump down the line in 2016, and that's when my shift sort of became more permanent and more across the board. Obviously, we still call out a lot of bullshit in our own party here. There's still a lot of that. No party's perfect. But that's how I sort of became the more left-leaning centrist individual that I am today.
Sure. My path is a lot like yours. I grew up in a tiny little bright red town. I didn't know a Democrat when I was growing up. I was told Democrats were communist. So my stepdad actually ran for North Carolina House when I was 16. I helped his campaign out the best I could. Being a 16-year-old, we would go to polling places, go to listen to him speak. I even had encouraged him to go speak at an NAACP meeting. So obviously to say that I grew up in a conservative household, my stepdad's also an evangelist and now just a straight up pastor. I grew up in about as conservative of a household as you possibly could. I went off to college as quickly as I could at UNCW. And while I was there, I ran into a cute girl that just happened to be the chair of the Young Democrats. And so I was trying to find any way I could to talk to her more. So
as old as time.
So I decided that I wanted to debate with her. And so I joined the Young Republicans, and I was one of the few at the time, and so just so that I could, talk some game to her every week. Because we used to be cordial back then. We used to be able to have it where the Young Republicans and the Young Democrats could get together and have debates and actually try to work and solve on things. Lots changed since then.
Yeah.
I went off after college. I was traveling the country for 2 years, worked out of a suitcase. That I was, driving around in my car a lot. I really hate listening to the same songs over and over and over. And, radio stations, even when I was, in college, played only about 20 to 30 songs.
Yeah.
So if you're driving in a car for a couple hours a day, working, basically that's your office, it grows tired on you. So I started listening to talk radio. And that meant, of course, I was exposed to Sean Hannity and Rush Limbaugh, and I Neil Bortz. So I used to listen to them every day. Made sure that I was tuning in, seeing what my daily talking points were going to be. Obviously, that was around the time of the Iraq War starting, and 2001 had happened, and I was there was a brief depression right after that, or a recession, I guess that maybe is the better word for it.
Yeah.
So I was unemployed for a minute. So, I had a lot of angst, and I was just angry, right? And so then when the Iraq War happened, it kind of brought out those feelings of, rallying around the flag, and that, hey, we need to attack the ones that did it. Well, as I started becoming more and more, involved, some of the things started not adding up for me.
Hmm.
You know, how we ended up in Iraq. It didn't find the weapons of mass destruction, was the term back then. But I still kept plugging along, and started working my way up in the corporate world, and I got a job in a storage, portable storage and moving company. And 2008 happened, and of course, our industry was built on the housing industry. So one day I just woke up and I was laid off. No, I listened to conservative media, and George Bush was the president at the time. So they weren't obviously telling me that all of this was coming right around the corner. I wasn't hearing it. So one day I walk in and I get laid off, and it was through no fault of my own. It was a rough, couple years after that, trying to find any work. I tried to become I did become a personal trainer for a good minute. During that time, I was able to set my own schedule, and I had some friends that were going to DC to listen to Obama's inauguration. And I didn't vote for the guy, at the time. I was still, obviously very ingrained in being a conservative. And I decided to go because how often do you get to ever go to a presidential inauguration, right?
Yeah.
And it was one of the greatest experiences that I've ever had in my whole life. I mean, I'll probably never be around that many people ever again.
Right.
It was snowing, like kind of on-off flurries, and everybody was standing out there. We were like jam-packed in like sardines. We had been there since like 6:30 in the morning. And so everybody was festive. Everybody was happy. It was like one giant party. And everything that I had started to know about what Democrats were, I was seeing that wasn't true
Right.
in front of me, right? And then Obama started talking about healthcare and, what happens if you're, driving along and you get hit by a car? What's going to happen? A lot of things he started saying, making a lot of sense on how that, people were going bankrupt at the time. This was before Obamacare.
Yep.
So, people were going bankrupt from their hospital bills. And I started seeing friends that this was happening to. And the financial crisis and how all that ended up gave me a lot of angst, right? And then I remember listening to Rush Limbaugh's show one day. I was still listening, hadn't switched it off yet, and he started playing something about like Obama, and I'm like, wait a second, like this is not who I am, right? And it was like a big moment. I decided I couldn't listen to that anymore, so started listening to NPR, any type of news station that I could get a hold of, local news, all of that.
Yeah.
And a lot of the things that I was being told, I found out was just not the full truth of it. And ended up going back to school and getting my degree in political science. And then, as you said, Trump comes along.
Yeah.
I tried to start my own party and everything all before landing on actually go with the Democrats. But once Trump came along, it was just like you have to decide at this point, right?
Yeah.
A third party is never going to happen, probably in our lifetime, unless we go with ranked choice voting or something. So it was either go along with what Trump was saying, or go along with what Clinton was saying was going to be the only path for me. And Trump saying, John McCain, that Trump's, I don't go for, or what was he said about the
is that the
POWs? I don't
get captured or something.
Yeah, war heroes don't get captured. Yeah. There was no way I could endorse that, right? And then the Hollywood tape came out, and there's just no way that I could endorse that. I was disgusted by my family, that's these giant Christians and everything, are backing this man that believes things that, like, if I said that and my mom heard me saying that, she would slap the tongue out of my mouth. You know what I mean? There was no way that I would get away with saying those things, and my mom wouldn't tolerate anybody else that would.
Yeah.
So it was it's kind of how I'm here.
Yeah.
Ended up running for getting involved, organized my district that had not ever been organized. We were able to start getting a regular organization there, and then I decided to run for North Carolina House in 2018. Ran into a buzzsaw in Terrence Everett, but primaries make both candidates stronger, and I ended up running for town council the next year, and now I'm a town commissioner. Got reelected with a very high margin last time. So I go to work now every day trying to help the American people and the people for Wake Forest and everything. So
And now we're doing this to try to broaden how much we can help, right?
yeah, let's talk about why did we want to. What's the story behind Jackass Politics? How did we end up here? You want to kick that off?
I mean, so I can kind of, I guess, go back a little bit. Me basically rejoining Twitter, X, whatever the hell you want to call it today. And, we sort of, not saying we have prescience here, but we sort of looked at the Democratic ecosystem, the media ecosystem, and we were like, there's such a massive gap here. There's such a conservatives are just so far ahead of us, and it's either you're on the super rah-rah side where everything the Democrats do is perfect and right, or you're the super, super wonky side where you go over all these policies and very in-depth, get down into the weeds in it. And there's just this massive gap in the middle of people who can just be like, we're just people too, right? We're not celebrities. We're not superstars. We're just guys. And we wanted to create something where we can just come on and we can, basically, we don't have all the answers. We're not going to pretend that we do, but we are capable of calling out the bullshit and realizing that it's bullshit, like a lot of people are. We're trying to hold people accountable, hold the Democratic Party accountable, but not just them, hold Republicans accountable too, because they still say the most ridiculous fucking things all the time. But what are we doing here, Adam? We're here to remind the Democratic Party that the way to win is to be bold. It's to be the big tent party. It's to speak to the working class, the voters that have been leaving the party in droves since as far back as like 2012.
Right. We've been making a lot of missteps, a lot of misinterpretations of things we should be doing. And I think it's just stuff that the common person like you and myself might be seeing. And when all you do is sit in an office in DC or maybe even in your district, in your capital city, you're not hearing everything. You're getting a lot of your stuff from consultants, especially the House. They got to run elections every 2 years. So they start, they'll kick off 2026 here in probably another 6 months, right?
Oh, yeah.
And they're always constantly fundraising. So they don't really, they're going to the donor class, and they're not going to people like you and me. Right. And I think what we saw in the last election, the last election definitely brought this podcast to be, because I was doing everything I possibly could to help Kamala win. Mm-hmm. She had people getting bussed in here the final couple weekends. I was giving 4 to 5 inspirational speeches a day on the weekends.
Yeah,
they were having people bust in here. We're one of the bluest counties in North Carolina, and right. North Carolina was a battleground state this past year, mm-hmm. and we were busting in people, and we had New Hampshire coming in, Connecticut. Kids from Columbia University, Howard University, you name it. We had a bus coming in to here and going out and knocking on doors. And it was my job to inform them of local issues and get them fired up and everything for going out and door knocking. We really felt that, and I know in just our talks, I thought that we had this on lockdown. Everything I was being told from the party, every bit of information I was getting was all good. Positive. We're, winning over voters. We're knocking on the most doors ever.
Yep.
And so going into election day, I really didn't think there was going to be I thought it was going to be over quick.
Yep.
And then everything started to fall apart very quickly that night.
Yep.
And it was, so talking in between Ian and another one of our friends of ours, we started doing a dissection of how did this happen and how did we end up here. It's just incredible that I didn't see it back then.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I didn't, obviously I think I was maybe a little more cynical on it than you,
a
but
little bit.
I didn't have necessarily the data that you had. But even I was surprised at the breadth of the loss.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, in retrospect, it's obvious to me now that, I mean, I think, if I'm being honest, I mean, in the back of my head, there was also, in our group chat, there was a video that was shared from Don Lemon where he's interviewing people in Cleveland, and the racial diversity of people saying that they were going to vote for Donald Trump and why, it lingered throughout my head for the rest until everything happened. And, I wanted to initially dismiss it because it's CNN, Don Lemon,
Sure. Yeah.
like,
I mean, it's not widespread data, right? It's kind of an anecdotal, like, that one little piece. But yeah, I think we were both sort of in that. We looked at that video and it was kind of like, okay, it's still creeping in the back of our heads, but you're still hopeful that there's time to make it come good, right?
Yeah, I mean, and it's not only that we were going to make it good, but that probably what this guy did was, he's a national news correspondent, and he was, just laid off and trying to make his name again.
Yeah.
He probably just chose some people to be, get the views. It's easy to dismiss it, right? It's very easy to get it where you're lying to yourself on what you're seeing.
Yeah.
But, at the end of the day, I think what boiled down in the last election was that it was a change in election, right? And when Kamala is asked, not just once, but twice, what would you do different from the current administration? And your answer is, I don't know. I would keep things the same.
Yeah.
Nothing. That's you're nailing your coffin shut at that point.
For sure.
And it also boils down to, going into the election, people would say, oh, well, the economy's bad. And then I can rattle off, well, GDP is up, and the stock market's at all-time highs, and, unemployment's low. But to those people like myself and you, if we don't feel any of that, right? Like, we're not making millions of dollars on Wall Street. Why do we care if it's at all-time high, right? Yep. It's a very personal view for most people. That's their view, right? It's their world. Perception is reality in this. And
you're not going to convince me that my lived experience is not correct.
Right. You remember when Taco Bell, had $5 meal packs, and it gave you all kinds of, stuffed burritos and stuff like that. And now you might get 2 tacos and a drink for that.
I mean, you literally can barely get out of fast food for under $10.
Right. Heaven forbid you go to Five Guys.
Right.
It's $30. So we all remember that things are cheaper and nostalgia kicks in, right? And when you're presented with a binary choice of somebody that says they're going to do the same thing that is getting higher prices, or another person that's going to do something different, and when they were in office, things were cheaper, it's a very binary choice for people, right? And at the end, we got to make sure that working for the work, or, making sure if the party's going to be of the working class, that people like myself feel it, right? Not just making sure that 401ks are doing good and that, while every one of us needs a job, we need to make sure that we have good paying jobs and that we have job security. We got to make sure that it's James Carville said it years ago during the Clinton era. It's always the economy, stupid.
Yeah. And number one, always.
And that also boils down to all politics is local as well. If you have your blue cities, and what was it that we were seeing leading up to the election? All this. You go into a CVS in say San Francisco, they have every product is in behind a lockbox, right?
Yeah.
You have a homeless, not just like area, you have a whole several blocks, tent cities.
Yep.
People, using the bathroom in the middle of the street and just walking along like it's okay. We got to acknowledge that while we can, I don't want homeless people to just be rounded up and thrown in jail, right? That's not what
they need help.
We're going to say. But you got to address the issue.
For sure.
And just acting like that is okay is not okay.
No.
And we got to, this is where I think our party's got a lot of growing to do in understanding how that we can be progressive, but not like that, right?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
You need to be pragmatic as well.
Yeah.
And you have to recognize and not be afraid to acknowledge what reality is.
Correct.
I think there's been a lot of, trying to force, one of the things that came out after the election in Ruben Gallego, I think that's how you pronounce his last name.
Gallego. Yeah.
Gallego. Talks about how we tried to force Latinx on the Latin community, and nobody asked for that.
No. Who the fuck needs that, right? No one was asking for it.
Right. And it's just, we need to get back to working for the people, or else we can't make advances in human rights if we don't start running our cities better, if you don't start allowing in your urban most dense areas of town, if you don't start allowing housing to be built, just doing common sense things, and instead just getting wrapped up, it's more about being in the process and instead of getting results. And we got to get back to being a nation of builders. We need to get back to being the party of abundance, acknowledge that supply and demand is a real thing. And the answer is not, oh, hey, daycares are really expensive. Let's make it where more people are able to go into daycare and subsidize it on the demand side.
Right.
Like you're making things worse.
Right.
Like, you want to help and I want to help too. Right. But the answer is not give money to the people that are going to have the demand. Let's make it cheaper for them by making it where we can open up more daycares. Right. Yep. Like, let's find incentives to open up more and more daycares. Let's get training programs set up to have it where we get more daycare set up.
Yeah.
Look at the regulations, see if there's some regulations that were meant and good and just don't serve the purpose anymore.
Right.
I read a story the other day about this. You'll see how this kind of ties in. I do a little bit of a Trump weave here, right?
Okay. Weave going.
So I want to say it's in Long Island. They have it where if you basically view in on pretty much any part of this area of New York, you'll find scaffolding everywhere.
Yeah.
And somebody was like, well, why is there always scaffolding in these areas if there's never any construction going on? And it turns out that in the 1970s, they had a citizen that was walking under a building. And, most of New York, some of these older buildings were built in the late 1800s, early 1900s, and they're falling apart. And somebody was walking under one, and a piece of the facade fell off and killed somebody.
Yeah.
So they made a regulation up that said, hey, you got to make sure that you're doing facade repair. However, if you have this covering, and it looks like it's scaffolding, but it's not, and it's basically just like a little covered area. And if you have, basically the regulation was, if you have that covered area, then you're held not responsible if the facade falls off and hits somebody.
Right.
So then that's what everybody started doing. It's cheaper to set up these little scaffolding things than to actually fix the part of the building that's fallen off.
Yeah.
And then the funny part about it is, if you actually go in and look at the ordinance building that enforces this ordinance, they have scaffolding set up in front of their building.
Yeah.
And it's just asinine, right? Like, it's understanding that is a policy that's being abused. Yeah. And it's regulatory capture that's happening. And we got to get away from doing stupid things, and let's try to actually wake up and help people every day.
Yeah, 100%. That's why we started this. I mean, we got to call that bullshit out, right? We've got to, we don't pretend to have all of the answers. If we don't have the answers, we hope that we can find them, or at least help people find them. But if nothing else, you can watch us argue about butter from time to time. So, all right. So do we want to switch to tweets of the week?
Awesome.
All right, so we have a handful of tweets here. They will appear either here or here on the video, but I will also read them out. Okay, so our first one is a tweet from Politico. So the primary headline is that Democrats don't blame Harris. In fact, many want her back to run for president in 2028. Adam, what the hell do we think about this?
I'm going to simplify my answer here. What I don't want to see is another 2016 where we have a candidate that comes in assuming that it's their time again because they had done stuff in the past to help us out. I'm completely fine with her wanting to throw her hat in the ring. She's more entitled to do it. But we need to have a fair process in place to make sure that no candidate feels like they have a leg up.
Yeah.
I know we have changed the super delegates since 2016. But we shouldn't have anybody that's just that one kingmaker, right? And that's just what I don't want to see happen again. So more than happy to see her join in, and if she wins in an outright primary and it's not felt like that's an endorsement for her, automatically given to her, then I'm all for it.
Yeah, I'm basically of the same opinion. This one feels. I don't want to get caught in a retread. I don't want to get caught trying to brute force, Kamala Harris down voters' throats. And I, like you said, if she can come on the scene, if she can primary and she comes out on top fairly and with no behind the scenes push from the party, so be it. If she rises to the top and proves that she's the best candidate for 2028, that's fine. I do not think that will happen. I hope that doesn't happen. Not that I don't think Kamala Harris was a good candidate. That's not really what I'm saying. It just feels like we've done this already, right? We've done it a couple of times. 2019
Been there, done
Democratic, right? Exactly. 2019 Democratic, primary. She was ultra liberal, very, very far progressive. Walked back a lot of those stances for 2024 to try to be more palatable. She's done both sides of the of the Democratic equation at this point. So again, like you said, if she comes across as the best candidate, she wins the primary. So be it. It is what it is. That's what the process is for. But I'm hopeful and honestly a little surprised that that there is a contingent of the Democratic Party that does want her back.
I don't really know if that's also the case. I think that could also be some people from her, wanting to be in her campaign or behind the scenes trying to go ahead and drop that. I mean, that's probably her people putting that out there.
Jen O'Malley Dillon's like, no, we're coming back.
Yeah. And I apologize if you hear my Roomba going on out there. I don't know what it's set on a schedule, but
I can't hear it, but at least you keep hearing it. All right, next tweet. This one kind of ties into the last one. So Gerry Connolly defeated AOC to become the ranking member of the House Oversight Committee by a vote of 131 to 84. Now we talked about this one. There's a lot of back and forth on what this, whether this was a good thing or a bad thing. What do you think? What do you think of this? AOC is I guess what you would call a rising star in the party. She's very well known, often known for very progressive ideas. So what do you think with going with a 74-year-old cancer patient over AOC?
Can you hear my dog whining?
A little bit.
I can let him in if you want.
Fine.
Okay. So, here again, it's signaling, right? if we look at the last election and what had happened, and we lost young people, she's popular with young people, and we probably need to listen to that. They're going to be the future generation. They're going to be future voters. They already are voters. And she's showing a will to listen, because there are Trump AOC voters.
Yeah.
And she even reached out to them and said, hey, I'm listening. I'm not going to argue with you. I just want to hear why.
Right.
I know that she's had some real stances I don't agree with in the past. Our party went through a real liberal period that kind of went further than what some of us in the center are kind of comfortable with. But, I think that's a mirroring of what was happening in our national ecosphere. The pushback to Trump is going to be kind of like a rubber band kind of elasticity to it, that he goes far right, we're going to go far left. So, I think we're kind of realizing that we need to get back to doing what we do best and making sure that we run our cities right and deliver for the people. And this move, it was not the best move for us, if I'm being honest about it. Not a huge AOC fan, of her old politics. She seems to have started to come around and start realizing that, she's, I know, made the DSA kind of upset with some of the stances that she's had. And I think she's kind of realized too that you got to do things and be effective, and you have to actually deliver for people. You can't just talk the talk all the time. Mm-hmm. And you can't just have these, virtue signaling, far left ideas that, you're just out there getting people riled up over. We got to deliver for the American people, or they're not going to care about anything else. That we got to make sure that their wallet's taken care of, and so we got to get those issues right before we do anything else. I think this kind of echoes with something that had happened, and you and I had talked a little bit about. We want to talk about that we want to be the party for the working people, and then one of the first things we do after the election is re-nominate Chuck Schumer for our Senate minority leader. Yeah, and Chuck Schumer was heavily involved in repealing Glass-Steagall. I think I'm pronouncing that right. I've never known how to pronounce that right.
We'll look it up.
Which that ended up, for a lot that don't know, that bill basically helped enable the repealing of Glass-Steagall, led to the 2008 financial crisis. Yeah. And to somebody like me that has all this angst built up over, what happened, and worried about waking up one day and because some Wall Street asshole did something, I'm going to lose my job again. Right. That anybody my age and maybe a little younger has that lost their job from it. They probably still have some, pent up frustrations over that, because nobody went to jail for it. No, quote unquote, no laws were broken. So it's
this one, I'm very frustrated with it, and I think part of it is a lot of people still view AOC, in particular her policies, from when she first came on the scene, when she was running in 18 and took office in 19, and she and Pelosi butted heads, and there's a lot of reports around that Pelosi was kind of pulling the strings behind the scene for several months to make sure that this didn't happen. With the votes, obviously, I think Miss Pelosi is in the hospital, currently recovering from hip surgery after a fall, and I'm very frustrated with it because, like you said, Schumer, Kamala Harris's campaign staff going on Pod Save America and basically accepting no responsibility whatsoever for the campaign faltering this election. It just makes me feel like maybe we haven't learned a fucking thing, and we're just going to go bang our heads against the wall for the next 2 years, and then another 2 years before the presidency, but presidential election. But it's frustrating to me because people still view AOC as her original very ultra progressive policies. Obviously, we talked about defund the police, abolish ICE, deeply unpopular pieces of messaging, deeply unpopular policies. Yeah, she was wrong for that, right? That was not good. But if we reduce our talent pool to the people who have never offered up a policy or something that was deeply unpopular, we wouldn't have anybody left except Gerry Connolly. But at the same time, her views, like you said, have shifted more towards the center left. She does still have very progressive policies, but she also has some very populist policies, Medicare for all or single payer, however you want to view, what that is. It's not identical, but they're very close. Housing is a human right. We have a housing crisis in this country. Solving the housing crisis is going to help so much of the middle class and the working class. But people don't, all they remember is, her ultra progressive policies, but things have changed. And I think as a party, if we don't allow the younger generation to try to move us in a different direction, we're just going to keep hemorrhaging vote share. We're going to keep losing these. Voters that have been abandoning the party for, years now, right?
I'm sorry, my vacuum cleaner was getting all sucked out.
I thought it was my air conditioning. All right, next tweet, and we'll just go over this one real quick. I don't want to dive too deep into this one, but the House Ethics Committee secretly voted to release its report on the conduct of former Representative Matt Gaetz, and they are going to release it. What do you think, Adam? Do you think anything's going to come of this? Is this the end of Matt Gaetz? Do I never have to see his fucking face again? Or is he going to go on OAN or something like that, and I'm still going to see clips of him around?
I mean, I think he's still going to run for governor of Florida. I call me cynical these days. I have no hope that this report, I mean, we were told it wasn't coming out, and then all of a sudden it's just like, oh, hey, it's actually going to come out. I don't know. It seems.
Yeah, I'm hoping this is obviously we haven't seen the report. My assumption is that it's pretty damning. I think people pretty much think or have posited that it's quite damning. This would have once been absolutely a career killer. We are way past those times now. I'm hopeful that it will have a lasting impact on Matt Gaetz, but I am the same way. I'm a little bit cynical on that. Yeah. So anyway, all right. Two more tweets. All right. Second to last tweet here. Fed Chair Jerome Powell. People feeling the effect of high prices, not high inflation. This one's particularly funny to me because it's such a damn semantics argument. Yes, right. Okay, fine. It's not currently inflation, but what's the point of this? Like, why do you make this semantics argument? Is it self-preservation on his end?
Well, no, I think he was pushing back to Trump. Trump wants to say that all of this is, that he should have control over the Fed, and that, nothing that the Fed's doing is good, and he should be able to fire the Fed chair if he doesn't like him. He doesn't want the Fed independence, and I think Jerome Powell is coming in. They cut rates. I think he's trying to say something that tried to lessen the blow of inflation, and try to tell the American people that, hey, I think he said it poorly, but basically I think the way as I interpret it, is saying that we've had inflation, now prices are high, but inflation now is under control, and that's why we are cutting rates. Yeah. And, if you also look at some of the bigger drivers of inflation right now, it's, inflation covers every product that's on the market. And, one of the big drivers is home prices, right?
Yeah.
We've already talked a little bit on this. We'll probably talk about it many times because that's part of what I do as a town commissioner, is making sure that we got to pay attention to home pricing. And, if we don't allow more homes to be built, then, all we're going to do is just make things more expensive. And now as interest rates start coming down and people want to, the people that were locked in at, like myself, at 2.85 or something like that, the rates start coming into a little bit closer parity to what we have. So it's not so much of a hit. We want to get back out in the market and, take advantage of the equity that we have.
Yeah.
And what we're seeing on the housing, and if we're not building them, they're going to stay expensive. And then we're also creating a little bit more demand, and it's only going to make that more expensive, right? So I think that's kind of where he's going with that, in that prices are high. People are dealing with high prices, but we've had the inflation already.
Yeah. And it kind of ties into, Donald Trump's interview with, I believe it was MSNBC, where he basically, talked about not being able, not guaranteeing that the tariffs aren't going to cause further inflation, not being able to commit to, prices going down, and the Time magazine interview saying that, well, it's hard to bring prices down once they're up. It's really hard to bring them down. Yeah, no shit. And I think this is, I agree with you. This is sort of mirroring that sentiment that once the prices are up, if they retreat, it's an extremely slow retreat over a long period of time.
But that's also, we don't want deflation either, right?
No.
If you're not growing, you're shrinking, right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of
our economy is based on basically infinite growth, right? So, it's
stupid premise, right?
Right. It's problematic if we have that deflation. So no, I agree with you. It was just it was an interesting way that tweet was put forth, and there were several people that said it, and it's just offering some clarification there. So, all right, last tweet that we are going to talk about. So, a Wall Street Journal article came out earlier this week, and in it, so it was titled "How the White House Functioned with a Diminished Biden in Charge." And in this article, they spoke about how Biden's cognitive decline or obvious cognitive issues dated back as far as 2021. So just a few months after taking office. And some of the White House aides would say that they had to repeat instructions to him multiple times. They had to tell him where to enter and exit stages and podiums multiple times, and he would still forget. He had quote unquote good days and bad days cognitively, so much so that meetings would have to be moved, to the next day in hopes that he was having a better day that day. What do we think of this, Adam? What are your thoughts on this one?
I don't think it's really anything that we didn't kind of already know about him. I don't know what purpose it serves in throwing it out there now, other than it just hurts us, right? It makes. I see this as enabling Trump. Granted, on the one side, we do want to know things, right? And I just don't know if right now is the best time to throw it out there. I guess maybe at some point, now that Trump's going to get inaugurated and all that stuff is going to start going down, our attention span to things like this is very short. So maybe somebody's hoping to throw it out now and that we just kind of forget about it.
Yeah, hit a news cycle and move on.
It's the end of the year, and we're end of the year news dump, and hoping that people are going to want to start talking about Christmas and New Year's and then Trump. Yeah.
But for me, it's extremely frustrating. We were kind of told, and the Wall Street Journal has been sort of the leading figure on this. They were calling Biden out before that disastrous debate performance that he had that ultimately ended up with him, stepping back and shifting over to Kamala Harris. I do agree that. I agree with what you're saying from a timing perspective, but mostly just because I feel like they should have addressed this in 2021, right? They should. he was always supposed to be sort of a transition. You know, he was the guy that could beat Trump right then and then shift to somebody else. So why didn't they do that? Why was the party not prepared to pass the torch to somebody else? And if that's Kamala Harris, fine. You know, that okay, she's the vice president of the United States. That's a decent candidate to choose from. If that's who you think you're going to go with, that's totally fine. Again, but we would have had ideally had a primary. We would have had a free and fair primary where people selected from good candidates, because the Democratic Party does have good candidates, right? You know, it has good people. So why did we hold on for so long? Why did the Biden administration just not even, I mean, you know, in 2021, you think he can make it as a candidate to 2024. Okay. You know, that's maybe, you know, I don't know. We don't have the in-depth information that they did, but maybe, but expecting him to then be president for 4 more years on top of that. I mean, it's just, to me, it's just, and this is the kind of shit that we've got to call out. And, I agree with the timing, mostly just because I wish it had happened sooner. Not necessarily that we, you know, get the information that, oh man, you know, some days he's not capable of being president, right? But it feels a little bit like we were sort of lied to and betrayed. And I guess, you know, we were. But these are the kind of things that, in my opinion, need to be called out. They need to be brought to the forefront. And even if it's going to hurt at first, right? It's going to cause issues, but to make meaningful sort of shifts in the party, meaningful change, you're going to go through a little bit of growing pains. You're going to go through, you know, breaking some legs here and there to get to the point where, you know, the party can run at full speed. So yeah, it's extremely frustrating. I'm now that we know this, I'm hopeful that maybe this is the last time we talk about it, the last thing that comes out. No, people don't, you know, take this as a sign to start piling on and give their individual anecdotal stories about how they, you know, went into the Oval Office to talk to Joe Biden and he forgot something that they said 5 minutes ago. Fuck, I do that. You know, we don't need to go too much into the weeds on that. So hopefully this is the story and it just stops here, right?
Yeah, I hope so too. I don't want to keep talking about Biden's age for
right. I mean, he's
again.
done. He's done, right? He's done.
But you're right. We should have known this, and it was absolute hubris. And I don't know why nobody stood up to Biden when he decided that he wanted. I mean, the time for this information to me to come out was when he decided that he was going to run again in 24. And when that decision was made, somebody should have said something then.
Sure.
And to not have stood up to him then, and then have it where we finally get the full stand up to him and over the summer of this year. I mean, it's just a complete failure and frustration that now we're going to end up. I mean, the Supreme Court might be lost for probably the rest of our lifetime, unless something crazy happens.
Right.
You know, it's incredibly infuriating.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, it feels like, you know, that is a big part of the reason that Donald Trump's back in the White House now is their, you know, inability to admit that Joe Biden shouldn't have been the candidate. But yeah, we're all moving on from Joe Biden. We're all moving on from that. You know, Trump ideally is not going to ever run again. We're never going to have him in any sort of political office. So it's all about moving forward now, not looking back. So. All right. So our next section, Adam, is our Fix It in 5. And are we talking about housing today?
Yeah, sure. Why not?
You
good with that?
Yeah. Our Fix It in 5 segment is just basically exactly how it sounds. We have a significant issue that we identify, and we try to offer solutions in about 5 minutes or less. Now, hopefully, these sort of Fix It in 5s will set up future conversations where we can dive a little more deeply into the issue. But today's docket for Fix It in 5 is housing. So, if you're not a, millionaire, if you do not just have somebody gifting you a home, it is extremely hard to afford a house right now. I know personally in our area, we have seen house prices double. And, If I had to sell my house right now, I don't think I could buy back into my same neighborhood. I make a decent salary. I'm not rich by any stretch of the imagination, but I should be able to afford to buy a house, and I can't. So what is the problem, Adam? How do we make this palatable?
Kind of said it earlier, but it gets back to supply and demand at the end of the day. Housing is too expensive because Wall Street is buying up neighborhoods. NIMBYs are blocking every apartment project, and outdated zoning laws make it illegal to build anything. Basically, we've turned housing into a commodity for investors instead of it being a basic human need. And we got to stop zoning everything for single-family housing only. We need apartments, duplexes, and townhomes, the stuff regular people can't afford.
Yeah. So I want to talk about just real briefly the NIMBY. So NIMBY is not in my backyard, and that is often the sticking point. That's the hardest. You're talking about a significant change in people's opinions, because if you ask most people, just in a hypothetical situation, do you believe in building more housing? Would you be open to this? A neighborhood popping up over here, over here, over here. They're probably going to tell you, yeah, sounds like a good idea. Make it real and put it to them in okay, this is a development that's being built right behind your house. Now suddenly, no, literally not in my backyard. So how do we tackle this? How do we shift these people's opinions?
Well, so one of the things, I have to deal with this a lot being a town commissioner. For those that don't know, basically, me and 4 other people will kind of run everything in the town. We approve budgets, we approve house or area rezonings and stuff like that. So, a lot of times the reason why people are objecting to new housing being built, especially in, Wake Forest is the suburbs of Raleigh, and a lot of what it is that we've experienced a lot of growth real fast and our infrastructure hasn't kept up. So there's going to now be congestion, and people don't like congestion. And that's what, the reason why Bob that lives on the south side of town cares that an apartment complex is being built on the north side of town, right? It's not because he's worried about anything about his property values or anything that's not anywhere near him, right? So, but he does care about the congestion and making sure that he's able to get the work and not have to leave, an extra 30 minutes earlier because we're approving an apartment complex or something like that. So to bring these people in, we have to make sure that we're also looking at transportation. You got to make sure that your infrastructure is keeping up. And if we want to have it where we're growing, we need to grow in the right areas. So make it that instead of people wanting to come out here in the suburbs and live in apartments, let's make Raleigh, that we're building Raleigh up. We need more in our big urban areas. They need to go denser, and they need to have it where infill housing is built, and triplexes, duplexes, quadplexes, all of that is happening in your cities. And, we need to make it where we bring condos back. Here in North Carolina, and a lot of condos don't get built anymore. But when I was coming onto the market, that was some of the, first-time home buyer options that you had. The statute of limitations here now for if something goes wrong is so long that they'd rather just build apartments, developers would, instead of building condos. So we got to be able to have it where there's more diversity in our housing stock. Right. And to be able to do that, we also have to get the NIMBYs on board with it. And be able to make sure that we're doing the conservation. We have to let them understand that density means that we're not going and building out sprawl, and that by building up instead of pushing out, that now your commutes are going to be essentially cheaper or quicker because you're now closer in to your main thoroughfares, your main highways, but also you're not taking down the forest that's on the edge of your town. You're not taking down the farms. So we got to get them on board, and they do have some valid opinions as well.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, there obviously is some, the argument is sound that, congestion, obviously infrastructure is important, but also protecting what you view as your personal investment and thinking that affordable housing is going to pull that down. But we've got to, it's just such a massive issue in this country, and it affects so many aspects, other aspects of it, other than just house pricing. Affordable housing or having housing affects the economy in whole. It affects healthcare. I mean, it's so much that housing should be affordable. People should be able to have access to affordable housing. There's just, and we'll talk about this a little bit more and dive a little bit deeper into.
It's definitely going to come up, given
all these individual points, because this is not something that's being solved right now. It's not something that's going to be solved in the next 4 years. So we'll definitely dig into this one a little bit more. But the housing crisis really just is not rocket science, right? It's greed, it's bad policy, it's lack of political courage, and we've got to fix those, and then people can actually afford a place to live. So that's what we got to do. All right. Next segment is our Jackass of the Week. And who is our Jackass of the Week, Adam?
Well, I think I got a nomination. Let's cover, this is going to be a weekly thing we're going to do here.
Yep.
This isn't about just one bad tweet or one dumb take. It's about consistent, high-level jackassery that actively makes the world worse.
Yep.
And so, I think my suggestion for the week is a local House representative member here, Cecil Brockman. So we just recently had a pretty contentious bill that was supposed to be hurricane relief that was passed that stripped a lot of the powers out of essential positions into positions that Republicans won in the last election, taking away powers from the governor, from the AG, things like that, Board of Elections. And then not only that, there was a little provision that screwed municipalities like mine that makes it where we're not allowed to downzone or create inconsistencies any longer in our communities. And so it basically makes it where the only thing that I'm allowed to do anymore is just past rezonings. We can only make areas of town more dense, not less dense. So we can't control our growth or anything like that. We can't pass new rules for the town, new ordinances. So we have this really important bill, and Cecil Brockman doesn't show up like he does a third of the time. We're paying, especially his area. He represents the High Point, North Carolina area. His constituents are not being represented in votes a third of the time. I consider that completely unacceptable. Part of this job is making sure you show up and that you just do the things. I'm not saying you got to vote with the party all the time, Cecil. That's not what this is about. It's about where you stand on the beliefs. It's that you're just not showing up. You're not telling us where you stand. And then he puts out a tweet after people got mad at him not showing up for that vote. And granted, it wouldn't have mattered at the end of it. The Republicans had a veto-proof majority. The governor vetoed the bill, and they overrode the veto. They had the votes all of themselves. But the point is that Brockman, again, just didn't show up for an important vote. Mm-hmm. And then he has the audacity, when we get mad about it and call him out on it, to say that... I believe his exact words were, "You need me more than I need you."
Yep.
That's bullshit.
Yeah.
And it's infuriating. Part of the reason why I got into this is helping people. I believe in legacy, and I think that everybody has two deaths in life, right? You have the day that you die, and then you have the day that your name is never spoken ever again. Mm-hmm. And I won't mind to carry on as long as possible for a good reason. So I'm waking up every day trying to make sure that I leave a good legacy, and that hopefully things I'm doing are making the world better.
Yeah.
And I'm representing the community, and I'm listening to the voices that are needed to be listened to in the community and representing everybody. And if you're not showing up, you can't do that.
Nope.
And so I'm saying, Cecil, you need to be the person that needs to stand up. You need to be able to, if you have a view that's different than the party, say it. Go on record and say it with your vote and explain it. But don't just not show up.
Yeah.
That's
you, as a representative, you are literally elected to represent your constituents. And by failing to show up and vote, you are not doing the fundamental aspect of your job. You are representing no one when you don't show up. And I don't give a shit if you think that, well, this vote's a lost cause anyway. It doesn't matter. We're going to lose. That's not the fucking point. Your job, what you were elected for, you work for your constituents, so you do your job. And, you know, sometimes shit happens, right? You know, stuff happens and you might have to miss a vote here and there, an emergency. I'm sorry, and
I mean, Representative Joe John missed that vote.
We're
not mad at Joe John.
He has a compelling reason to have missed that.
For those that don't know, he said he came out and that he has throat cancer.
Correct, and he was undergoing treatment. Okay, yep. I can't do anything about that. Can't argue with that. You said you were sick, Cecil. Great. You know how many times I've gone to work when I'm sick? You know, this is all you had to do was show up and vote, go back home and go back to sleep if you were sick.
Press a button, bro.
Right. This is all we're asking.
Wear a mask, come in, press your button and go home.
Yep, exactly. And like you said, you know, if this was the first time and he had said he was sick, I would have been like, oh shit, okay, maybe he must have had something serious and couldn't make it. But no, this is a pattern. You have shown us that this is what you do. So like I said, you know, you are failing the fundamental aspect of your job, and you need to fix that shit. And no, we don't need you more than you need us. That's not how this works. And that mentality shows me that you are in it for yourself and not to represent your constituents.
So for that reason, that makes him the jackass of our week. So congratulations to this week's jackass, Cecil Brockman. May your reign of stupidity be short-lived, because honestly, we're already looking at next week's contenders.
Yeah, and I'm coming for you soon, Nancy Mace.
And if you're thinking, wow, I hope I'm not next, here's a pro tip. Stop being a jackass.
Stop. Not hard. Not hard. All right, so we are now at our final thoughts, and let's recap kind of what we covered today. So we talked about butter and how eventually at the end we realized that we both store our butter like normal fucking humans. But we did lay down the debate rules, how the process is going to work. We shared why the podcast exists. We talked about some of the top tweets that we picked for the week. We offered up some quick but real solutions for the housing crisis, and we roasted Cecil Brockman pretty hard as our jackass of the week, and it's a well-deserved honor for him to be the very first jackass of the week.
Yeah, and I think next week we'll see what it brings. I think we're gonna see what we gotta go through Christmas. I don't know if anything will happen major through the week, but you know what? If it does, you'll hear about it here. If you liked what you heard, please share this episode, subscribe wherever you get your podcast, and send us your thoughts, especially if you got a contender for next week, Jackass of the Week. We're taking submissions also for our Fix It in 5 ideas, so hit us up.
Yep, and remember, being cool isn't about slogans, guys. It's about having the guts to tell selfish assholes to fuck off. So we'll see you next time.
Peace out, y'all.